Hi, this is John Colton Barry, story editor of Be Cool Scooby-Doo, and you are listening to A Podcast Named Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
The gang's all here, they're on the case, and there's no ghost that they wouldn't face, 'cause they dig it, Scooby-Doo. Yeah, they dig it, Scooby-Doo.
Hey Scooby fans, and welcome to another installment of A Podcast Named Scooby-Doo. On this episode, we're going to be revisiting the Lance Falk interview. I'm going to be posting the second part as promised, where Lance continues to talk about his experience working on those first 4 direct-to-video Scooby-Doo movies, from Zombie Island to Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase. But before we get to that, I just wanted to mention 2 other things. One is, if you haven't been checking them out, Nick from What's With You Scooby-Doo has been posting short commentaries on these direct-to-video movies. He's done the first 4. He's just posted Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase. I shared it to the Facebook. Be sure to check it out, as Nick has a good time going through those old movies and giving some thoughts on them. And they kind of dovetail nicely with the Lance Falk interview. Obviously, it wasn't planned that way, but be sure to check those out. The show's called What's With You Scooby-Doo. If you haven't checked it out already, you can search it on Facebook, or you can just link through the Podcast Named Scooby-Doo Facebook page. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is John Colton Barry has just recently on Twitter announced that it is official. Warner Brothers is going to launch a Boomerang cartoon streaming service, which benefits us Scooby-Doo fans because the very long-awaited Be Cool Scooby-Doo Season 2 will actually debut on this streaming service, as well as the unaired Season 1 episodes. Now, in Canada here, we've actually had the first complete season streaming on Netflix. Everything from Mystery 101 to The People vs. Fred Jones, which has been fabulous. I remember when they first got posted, I was a little disheartened to hear that Canada was the only region that had these, and that there's still people in the States and other parts of the world who haven't seen these episodes because they're not available, which is just kind of terrible. Nobody really understands why the show's been kind of getting the runaround and not getting the support, but there you have it. Now, this Boomerang streaming service, it'll launch sometime in spring of 2017, and they're saying it's going to be about $5 a month, and it's going to have not just Scooby-Doo, but Tom and Jerry and Bugs Bunny, and I'm not sure how people are really going to receive it. As excited as we're going to be to kind of have access to like Season 2 of Scooby-Doo, it is going to be the exclusive home for new episodes of Scooby-Doo, Looney Tunes, and Tom and Jerry. Now, I'm not sure what this is going to mean for Be Cool Scooby-Doo on Netflix, but I kind of get the impression that any Scooby-Doo product moving forward will probably end up on the Boomerang streaming service, although perhaps the direct-to-video movies like the recently released Shaggy's Showdown will still go to Netflix as all the movies previous have. Although from a financial perspective, I don't really know if that makes sense, since the whole point of doing this is to create, new revenue streams, and unless they have an existing contract with Netflix that covers, X amount of movies, it's very likely that they're just going to move all their stuff the way Sony did a little while ago, and that would kind of suck, because I've also got the impression, from what I've been able to kind of read and pick through, that this streaming service is, as of spring 2017, only going to be available in the US, which means, again, a single region has access to the material, and everybody else is kind of SOL. Now, there's still going to be probably a DVD release. There's still going to be access somehow. It's also very possible that just because it's being released on the Boomerang streaming service in the States, it may still be able to go on Netflix in Canada. So until it actually happens, we don't know exactly how it's going to play out and who's going to be able to watch it. But at least we know it's coming. At least we know where it's coming to, and we have a vague idea of when it's coming. So that's something. That's more than we had before. And speaking of more than we had before, I think that's probably as good a segue as any to move into Lance Falk Part 2. I won't take up any more of your time. We'll just jump into that. Hope you enjoy Part 2, and we will see you on the other side.
All right, let's go.
anyway, blah, blah, blah. So do you want to hear that key story?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Once upon a time, our development crew, led by David Stoy, was told, you're making Scooby-Doo movies, and they're going to be hour long, and you're going to, and you'll get a writer, and David said, well, let's use Glenn because we've worked with him before, and he's written Scooby-Doo. And you ought to get a hold of Glenn, because Glenn will talk your ear off for years. So, and he's a big fan of Scooby-Doo.
I've been wanting to talk to some of the writers, so yeah, I'm going to hunt him down.
Glenn's the guy to talk to. So anyway, there was the quote-unquote brain trust of this thing. There was Davis, of course, Glenn, Jim Stenstrom, who'd be the head designer, and myself. And where I would be possibly helping the writing capacity, supplementing Glenn. I've definitely worked in an artist capacity, supplementing Jim, and also kind of being at Davis's elbow in the post-production and junior producery things. So we sat around the room, we talked about it, and Jim was the first guy that spoke. And Jim said, you know what? I want to do real monsters. I'm trying to Scooby-Doo. I kind of don't get it, why it's always a guy in a mask. And if it's not a real monster, you're limited by what a human being could do in a costume. And it's a cartoon, for crying out loud. We can do anything. Let's have real monsters. And Glenn says, no. Scooby-Doo is a solvable mystery where the audience solves it. It's always been that way. That's the premise of the show. That's what it is. We need to do that. We're just doing it longer. And Davis said, the thing is about that is you can do that for 22 minutes. But if you do it for 70 minutes and you're yanking people around for 70 minutes and it turns out to be a fake, first of all, it's really difficult to hide that, the resolution for that long. And the other thing is it's kind of unsatisfying to do an entire movie where it's a guy in a rubber mask. And I was the guy who said, and this is my one significant contribution, but I think it's a really great one, is I said we need to do both then. So we need to have, definitely in the body of the story, we need to have a solvable mystery and an unmask and do all the Scooby-Doo stuff, but we also need real monsters woven into the story in some fashion so that we can fill it out, but also to make the stories more sophisticated, because we can have clues leading to one thing, but they're really, really about the other thing. And so you can do all these little back and forth cross things. And as soon as I said that, everyone was like, yeah, that's it. That's what we do. And so I think, I don't know if they still handle it that way, but that's how we did ours. And I'll give you an example, because in Witch's Ghost, the whole first 2/3 is about like this witch's ghost, kind of haunting the Salem recreation thing, but it's a big tourist attraction in a Salem recreation city or a town. And it turns out everybody's in on it because it helps the tourist trade. And that was how the story ended, was, it's not just one guy, it's not just one suspect, it's all the suspects, it's everybody. So that was the script we were given. And what we did was we said, but there really is a witch's ghost, that this legend that they were all leaning into is truth, and that they really resurrect the witch's ghost. And the writer character, who's like a Stephen King character coming back to his New England home, is really using the gang to get his hands on the Necromonicon, which will really get the witch's ghost resurrected, and he will control her and be powerful. And so the last third of it, or last quarter of it, is dealing with the real thing, right? Well, we added that part. Or the other example is Alien Invaders, where I set it up. The opening credits, you see a spaceship coming through the outer solar system to the inner solar system, landing, and you see a UFO buzz the mystery machine and spin it out of control, and you definitely have no question it's a real spaceship, because nothing man-made could do all the things you just saw. And then when the gang's out because the cars crash in the middle of the desert, Shaggy and Scooby are walking through the desert, they ran into a couple of aliens on hovercrafts. Well, your brain as the audience, is going to see, well, I saw a spaceship, now I see aliens. Therefore, those aliens have to be real because the spaceship was real. Well, no, the aliens were fake. And ultimately, when you find out who the real aliens were, they were the ones that looked human that Shaggy and Scooby fell in love with. And the aliens are really benign in the story. They're good. And the guys you see as the big-headed kind of Mars Attacks type aliens, they're really like pulling a scam, like a typical Scooby-Doo scam, where they're trying to scare people off with this whole Area 51 thing so they can mine uranium or whatever they're mining. So you see, we mix the two elements up. And the other things that also give us two tracks. So you have, because you have a lot of characters, you have Shaggy, Scooby, and their two alien girls, like an alien dog and an alien girl, but we don't know they're aliens. And they're following a line of investigation. But they're literally stumbling onto the bad guys that are falling through a hole in the ground. Where meanwhile, Shaggy, Velma, Fred, and Daphne are looking for clues and looking for footprints and have a magnifying glass, and they're interviewing suspects, and they're putting A and B together and connecting the dots. And they get there also, but they get there through work, where Shaggy and Scooby get there literally because they're agents of chaos and fall through a hole in the ground and solve it, because they're not intellectual characters. So it gave us the room to do both stories, you see.
I thought that was a really good choice after the structure of Zombie Island and the surprise of Zombie Island, to not just suddenly milk that like movie after movie after movie and shake it up.
Yeah, well, it was Glenn's gag in the room when I told you about that little initial meeting. Glenn's was like, oh, yeah, what if there are a bunch of fake things? And then at some point, Fred is like, it's so-and-so in a mask. And a zombie comes at him. He just grabs him by the hair and pops his head off. And then the head, like, screams at him, like it's still alive. And they're like, ah! So they think it's fake. It's a very Abbott and Costello thing. They don't believe it, right? And then it's really a thing. And we laughed our asses off when he said that. And said, yeah. And he put that in the show. And the whole show is that joke.
That's what sold me on that movie in '98 when I saw the trailer. I was like, I got to watch this.
Yeah. Well, so that's Glenn being very enthusiastic and supportful of that idea, is that, we could do both. And better yet, they could even kind of cross over each other back and forth. To his credit, I mean, he set a great template. And I still think, and I'm proud of Alien Invaders, but I still think Zombie Island, and I haven't seen all those movies by any means, but Zombie Island, I think, is the best one that I've seen. And that has a lot to do with Glenn. That has a lot to do with, we had zero interference from anybody. We just got to make it. It's due to the fact that after that, they told us, it's a little scary and a little gory for little kids. And we had to back it way down after that and tone them down. And, I think it was cool that it was a little scary. Kids like that. They're fine with that. As long as we're not being too explicit or horrific about it. So that's what you get when you have, good artists who work well together without a lot of interference. You get Zombie Island,
That makes so much sense when you say that, because one of the questions I was going to ask you was, you go from Zombie Island, which does have that sort of darker tone and more sophisticated storytelling, and with each successive movie, the comedy gets amped up until you get to Cyber Chase, where, like I said, it's just a 74-minute romp with lots of gags and action, and sort of all that texture and atmosphere is kind of gone. So to find that it wasn't a creative choice and it was kind of more of the studio noticing, this is...
And it wasn't a really hard, like, you guys got to blah, blah, blah. We were sort of like, you know what, can you lighten it up a little bit, guys? And my kids are watching this sort of thing. All right. We'll back down on the dripping zombies, things like that. And it wasn't a fight or considered a great hardship, but I think things a little better before we did that. I think it took a little 10% ding in enjoyment, but I had a ball doing my Alien one. I had a ball working on Witch's Ghost. I thought that was a lot of fun. Cyber Chase was a kind of like not a pleasure for anybody. It came out looking great, like the like the animation studio we used really, really did an amazing job on it. I think it looks better than all the other ones.
Yeah, who brought MOOK in?
But yeah, MOOK's a Davis studio that he had a relationship with. I did some of our better Johnny Quest and some of our better SWAT Kats episodes. And we had a bit of a relationship with him. I don't think they exist anymore, sadly. Yeah, we were very pleased with them, you know.
It was beautiful work, yeah.
Yeah, and if you dig around like our SWAT Kat and Johnny Quest and look at the MOOK ones, they're terrific. You know, they're really beautiful shows.
It's like when you see the TMS, when TMS did the Batmans or Justice Leagues.
Yeah.
Those were always like the best
ones.
Exactly. Batman Beyonds, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when the Batman did that reboot, you know, they kind of restyled boots. Some of those are just like over the edge and things are so good. You know, they're like little mini movies. And early on in Batman Taz, there was that Clayface two-parter, and the first part of that looks like a damn feature to me. It looks like a Miyazaki feature.
Yeah.
And it's so good. And I knew that blew them away. I knew that they were saying, like, man, they're doing like self-color lighting that we didn't ask for. They just did it. You know, and added these touches, gestures and things that we didn't. And our Johnny Quests are kind of all over the map. Some are just, they're really painfully animated. And then some are beautiful. And MOOK did the beautiful ones, you know.
It's nice when the overseas studio you're working with is excited about it and you get that extra production value.
Yeah. And I know, like anything, there are all sorts of pressures. It's not like these guys suck and those guys don't suck. It's, you know, it's budget and schedule and resources and circumstance and the culture of the studio. And a lot of the overseas studio have their A team and their B team and their C team, and our studio is paying for this, that, or the other, you know. And sometimes it's like the people you want aren't available, so you go with these other guys, and sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't, and, you know. Batman Taz is a really great example because it's all over the map, you know. But luckily they're all written and scored so well that, you know, even the ones that are a little rubbery looking are still pretty compelling shows. But then when you get like Heart of Ice, you get a Clayface one or the Mr. Freeze one, and it's like all the cylinders are firing, you know. It's amazing. And I think Zombie Island had that. I think Zombie Island does pretty much. That was like the height of it. You know, it all worked in that first one. We had the creative freedom. We had the resources. We had a great crew. You know, great crew that really cared about what we were doing. You know. I was curious what the development time for Zombie Island was. I'm assuming with each successive movie, you had a lot shorter time to write and design stuff. But like, how long did Zombie Island? How much breathing room did you get? Well, we the birthing of those projects is kind of like about 9 months between conception and delivery, which is there's your birth metaphor. And you know, it's a crew that works really fast. Glenn's like a freakishly fast writer. And he'll start talking to Jim, telling Jim what characters are in it. And Jim's already starting to design before there's even a script because he knows there's going to be Civil War zombies and knows who the main suspects are. Because we get a little beat outline and we start going through and Glenn is there so we can talk to him. So our development is sort of simultaneous with production, you know. And you know, one nice thing that came out of it is more of a personal story was they do these dog and pony shows where they just need to pitch it to like home video and various companies. So what you do is you take a model sheet or a model sheet drawing and you blow it up, Xerox it up, or rather, you know, make a copy of it, and then you take markers and kind of color it up, and then you blow it up and you put on a piece of foam core. And then when you go and pitch a story, you have these big giant flip cards with color drawings on them. And just by default, I was the guy that colored these things. And, you know, I did it in marker and color pencil and rendered them, not in a way that we really use in production because you can't really render stuff in TV animation. But I had a lot of fun, like uplighting the zombies and making their eyes glow and stuff like that. And, you know, Jim would draw them and I would color them. And it really didn't matter, like, production-wise, what the colors were, because, you know, when you really do stuff for animation, you have to have the backgrounds in front of you so the characters read against the backgrounds but don't clash with it. And this character works with that character, so you can't have similar colors. And there are all these other considerations, but I was just doing standalone art. Here's a zombie, here's a this, here's a that. So I made it look as good as I could by itself. So they all went through and they looked really good, and Davis ended up liking my color sense enough on these to say, why don't you give those to Color Key? Because I like where you've gone with them. So that's a really good starting point. And eventually, when he was working at SD, and there wasn't really a designer job for me, but I needed a gig, he said, well, you'll just be the Color Key guy. I like your color sense. But you can't do it in markers. You have to learn Photoshop. And I hadn't touched Photoshop by then. You know, I was a pencil guy. And so he said, and you start Monday, and that's your job. And so you better learn Photoshop over the weekend, you know. And I did. You know, I called in some friends who were really good at it, and they kind of gave me the fundamentals to just do that job. And since then, I built out, and that's all I use now, and I use Photoshop a lot. But that's the kind of guy Davis is. It's like he'd rather work with me than someone who's experienced in that. Like, he figures Lance is trainable, and I know him, you know. So he's that guy. So that's why I have a lot of loyalty for him, you know. I mean, I have a million Davis stories like that, where he didn't have to do that great thing for me, but he did.
Was Jim the one that redesigned the models for Fred and Daphne and Velma? And I was kind of curious why Fred and Daphne got the more major redesigns, whereas the other three still
because they looked the most out of date because of the bell bottoms and the ascot and things. Right. And it was just I think it might have been us, it might have been an internal note, or it might have been a note from the executives like, geez, no, you know, that's so 70s looking. The funny thing about Shaggy is Shaggy's timeless. He could say he's a beatnik, then he's a hippie, then he's a hipster, then he's like a grunge guy, then he's a goth guy. You could almost there's always room for a Shaggy, because there's always like a slovenly.
There's always
kid,
a slacker, yeah.
You know? Yeah, but the other guys, you know, ascots and bell bottoms, they're just. But they still do those, you know. They still do direct-to-video movies with those guys because they're branded thus, you know.
Yeah, I think it was an audio commentary with Chris Carter I heard one time. He was talking about an episode of The X-Files. It was called Triangle, and it was the characters kind of go back in time on the Queen Elizabeth, and some of the characters are playing Nazis, and he said there's a point when you create something that they become so culturally ingrained and iconic that you can basically do anything with them and people accept it. Like, you know, you see all these different iterations of Batman or Superman and I kind of feel like Scooby-Doo has hit that or hit that many years ago, because we talked earlier about the different shows and the experimentation that they do with it, and it's kind of like whatever they do on some level, it works.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is the base is always Shaggy and Scooby, and they're pretty generic, you know, as long as you don't mess with it. And I think actually, like that 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, somebody wanted to experiment with Shaggy and Scooby, and that did not fly with anybody, because they gave Shaggy sneakers and they gave him a reddish shirt instead of a greenish shirt, and that, like, they never did that again, you know. And it was a gag of mine in Alien Invaders, where they want to impress these girls, you know. So Shaggy has his shirt tucked in and his hair flipped back into like a ducktail, and they're all like kind of neat. And Scooby has a big kind of, you know, curl, like spit curl thing going on his collar. It goes gling, it's all shiny and everything, and it was a gag, you know. And we got mileage out of it. Like, wow, look at those guys. Yeah, they must have a date or something, you know, kind of thing. And you can go there because you're so used to seeing them in the normal sense that you can do that. But if they're all over the map all the time, you know, because even our Be Cool, they're sort of them, only they're kind of seen through a prism of a different art style. But the outfits are kind of similar, you know. So, and also the other thing is color. You know, if you keep them in the same family colors, it tends to look fine. Right. You know, she has red hair and a purple dress. It's going to look like that. Velma's in her vermilion and her orange with her brown hair. It's going to, and her glasses, it's going to look like Velma, you know. So
a couple of those movies, primarily Zombie Island and Cyber Chase, seem super design heavy.
Yeah.
I was wondering how much work kind of that first and last one were on a design level, because there's in Zombie Island, you first have that opening set piece to close off like the last Mystery Incorporated case. Then you have that montage in the middle as they're traveling the country. Then you have all of these zombies. You have all of this. There's just so many settings and characters. And I thought, especially with the last one, it might be harder. But
well, yeah, it was like we had time on the first one to do it, and on the fourth one we didn't have time to do it, but we had to do it anyway. You know, because now we were we had a schedule that said, 4's got to end by here because 5 is right there, and you just finished up 3. So it's where Zombie Island, it was just kind of considered a one-off at the time we were making it, and it was like, well, the home video department would kind of like to get it by this time, but there isn't like this train schedule to keep. Yeah, I would say, like, listen, that particular unit, you know, we're experienced, we're professionals, we're pretty fast at what we do, pretty good at what we do, because we've been doing it for a long time, you know, that, like, a challenging production is typical, you know. It's just, this is how those things are. And, they were kind of heavy, and if need be, you know, we'd pull on some freelancers to do character cleanup or some ancillary designs. But, you know, our main background designer on all that stuff, and he's one of the Davis regulars, his name is Drew Gentle, or Andrew Gentle, he might have been credited. Well, Drew is like a vet since the 60s, and he has recently retired, but Drew is incredibly fast and very versatile, and we almost just need Drew to design all the backgrounds for something, and then we just supplement him, you know, in a case of a crazy show with too much to do in it. But Drew always takes the lead on these, and, you know, like I said, I've written a bunch of shows with Davis. Drew was the guy that did all the backgrounds for everything I ever did, and I never had a note about it. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, or more often, no, that's even better than what I was thinking. You know?
I did notice there were more storyboard artists as each show went along as well. That's a schedule thing?
Absolutely a schedule thing. Like, ideally, you want the smallest crew with the longest schedule possible, because you can use the best people.
Right.
And you can be more consistent. But when you have, like, you know, but when you don't have a lot of time and you need to get a whole board out, you need a whole bunch of guys to do it. So
as for your role on the movies, your actual credit changes on each one, and you have multiple credits on each film. You start as model coordinator, and then your artwork coordinator and additional development and color stylist. And was it a very fluid environment? Did you guys have really set roles, or
no?
They just need you to do more work?
That's how Davis is. He lets people do things they're inclined to do, and he's good about testing people. And we had a production. It's a little too tight-laced right now in the business, but at that time he'd kind of like, well, you know, here are my guys, and we need all this stuff done. Let's see, you'll do this and do this and do that. Like I said, I was doing some coloring just because someone had to do it, and Jim could have colored it, but colored his own stuff. But that way, if I colored it, Jim could do twice as many drawings, and if I colored it, they could be in color, you know. So it facilitated that, and I was just part of the brain trust. So if there was any, you know, I'd work on the story with him a little bit, or I'd you know, do this and that. That's just Davis's leadership, you know, and his being a good guy, and trying to see what his crew's capable of, and knowing that I was kind of antsy to try other things. But where the credits lied, I don't know. I think down the road I said, well, if you're using my color choices for everything, even though a color key person is interpreting them. Could I get a color credit? Because that'd be kind of cool. And he said, yeah, I think so. I think you picked the colors for these things. So, yeah, I'll give you that. And then story-wise, I came in later and helped them. Like Glenn, I had nothing to do with the story on Zombie Island whatsoever. That was Glenn and Davis, 100%, except for that arching, we ought to do both. I mean, that's my contribution to that. But in the subsequent things, in Witch's Ghost, the opening thing with the mummy, I wrote that bit. I kind of wrote the prologue and kind of cobbled on the story with the other ones. So there's that one. Third one, what happened the second one is Glenn kind of got screwed out of writing credit because he did a massive rewrite on the second movie. But the writers brought in got their credit. So Glenn didn't really get a credit for it. And he not the credit he should have gotten, because he really re-stripped the gears of that thing. And so on ours, the third one that really Davis and I did all the work on, Glenn was in a meeting or two, and I think Glenn provided the idea of the jackalope. Thought that would be funny to have in the Southwest. But he got a story credit on that specifically so he would get residuals that he should have gotten on the second one. And I was more than happy to accommodate that. So really it's like story by Davis and myself and screenplay by Davis and myself. But Glenn has a story credit on that because he didn't get one in the previous movie. He should have gotten it. Hell, he should have gotten a story by credit on the previous movie. And so what we figured is we were just going to keep making these and making them and getting to write them. And all that stuff would have evened out, eventually. And I think, I was going to do another one. Davis would kind of co-write all of them to steer the ship. But he and Jim were writing one together. That was really good. And they did Cyber Chase instead. And they had a great script. And never got used. And so we, it was all part of the just getting out of there, thing that we never used it. And then it was going to flip back to Glenn, then it was going to flip back to me, and Davis was going to do kind of co-write all of them, and it was going to just alternate between Glenn, Davis, and myself, and we're going to do about 2 a year. And we're going to start adding more songs because you can get song residuals. It was just a thing like, oh, this is a really pleasant job with people I like, and it's an opportunity to make some residuals, And it just didn't.
There's a trivia bit that the Zombie Island script was based on an unused SWAT Kats idea. Is that true?
No. There was, elements. There are elements that we did a SWAT Kat. Yeah, you know what? That's more like true. That's the Curse of Cataluna, kind of the werewolfy part in it. And the woman who turned into the werewolf, and she's a seductress, and that's it. Yeah, Glenn did a SWAT Kats that never got made with that idea, and he took that idea and he just kind of popped it into Zombie Island as one of many ideas in Zombie Island.
Yeah,
maybe Zombie Island had 4 different things going on in it, and that was one of them, and that was fairly recycled from an unused SWAT Kats. I tried to pitch Johnny Quest in 1986 and failed miserably, but I kept those notes, and in the 90s when I got to write the show, I definitely reworked a couple of those ideas and got them made. So just don't throw anything out. Yeah. Glenn would not have done that if that SWAT Kats got made, but it never did. So
the whole cat god and zombie thing, there's a weirdness to that. They don't really dovetail into each other, but it's that wonkiness that sort of adds an extra element of coolness to that movie.
Yeah. I think he did a hell of a job on that thing, and I've always been a big fan of that script. As kind of a good how to do those movies. I think we hit the ground running with a great template, and Glenn should be rightfully proud of that job. So
now there's another trivia bit that I ran across that mentioned something about Jim wanting to maybe use live action actors in Cyber Chase. Is there any truth to that you know of?
I think Cyber Chase was a show that was such a mess that we were trying anything and everything to make it kind of work, or at least be interesting, or to just we're spitballing it. I think that was probably something Jim said, hey, what if we do this? What if we do puppets, or what do we do? Just something to bring this stupid thing to life. And we are kind of going in another dimension, or the VR world, and maybe we could have real guys there. And my recollection is we got a little excited about the thought of that, but there was no way in hell they were going to shoot that, you know.
It's not really practical.
But it was an idea of like, yeah, maybe they're going to cyberspace. We'd have real actors, and that would make this thing, the whole project, really interesting all of a sudden. Jim coming up with a great idea, you know, but it was probably like, you know, you guys aren't going to go for this, but what if when they were like in cyberspace, they were real? You know, we're like, oh, geez, that's cool. And then it was kind of like, yeah, but they'll never let us do it. And that probably died right then.
So do you have a favorite of the 4 films?
I think Zombie Island's the best of the 4, but obviously the one I wrote is the one I have the most emotional ownership of. But I think Witch's Ghost is really good. I think those all 3 of those are terrific, and all 3 of them bring it to the table and do a good job, and they work, and they're well produced, and they're well written, and I would never say that I'm a better writer than Glenn, you know, but I'm real proud of what I did. I think the 4th movie is the best looking one, you know, even though the story's what it is. I think it's gorgeous looking, and MOOK killed themselves on it. We killed ourselves as designers on getting that thing really cool and weird, because we were compensating for a weak story. So we threw ourselves into the design aspect.
Do you think the move to digital ink and
show
paint?
that just everything, you know, everything about it. So we, and storyboard wise, that kind of thing got an emergency. That probably has a lot of board credits on it.
It does, yeah. It's the most
probably
of the group.
More than any of them, because that was an emergency rewriting, and now we don't have any time to board it. So we handed that board out to a lot of people just to get the thing done. And we were designing furiously on that. And we probably the credits across the board on that are thicker. I would imagine that one has the most designers, the most board people, because it was the heaviest script and also the most problematic script that we did. You know, and at the end of the day, well, we brought it as far as production value is concerned. It certainly doesn't look rushed. You know, it reads rushed story-wise, but the boards are solid, and the designs are beautiful, and the backgrounds are beautiful, and it's a gauntlet to throw down to another crew and say, make something that looks as good as this. You know, it's not a challenge to make something that's a better movie. You know, because that'd be easy. So there's a tiki one I need to see, because I'm really into tiki. I know we did a Hawaiian tiki one. One of the crews did that. I'm kind of curious about that, because I like that whole Polynesian thing quite a bit.
I think that's the Aloha Scooby-Doo.
Probably,
yeah. Okay, a couple more questions here, and then I'll let you go.
All right.
What would you say your overall takeaway experience from doing these 4 movies was?
Well, that I believe that the one I wrote was the last thing that said a Hanna-Barbera production in history. I think it was the last, because I think from moving forward, like Cyber Chase said a Warner Brothers production. They all give Hanna-Barbera credit. They all give Ruby Spears credit, but mine said a Hanna-Barbera production with a logo on it, and that was it. And that's something to say. You know, that's something I can say. Oh, another thing I can't say is that Iwo was over there doing like publicity art, mainly, you know, like cells and things for stores. And we had, some of these shows had a lot of Shaggy and Scooby dressed like this, dressed like that, doing this, doing that. And I was the one that said, you know, Iwo's down the hall. He's on staff. He's being paid. Let's draft him to just do that stuff, you know? And Davis was like, I don't know, would he do it? I think it's kind of beneath him now, you know, to just be a grunt on production line. He's not the designer. He's not this, not that. I said, we can always ask him. Maybe he'd like to draw those guys. He's getting paid anyway, you know? And I went down and asked Iwo, and Iwo said, oh, that sounds like so much fun. So we got Iwo for free, relatively, because he was already on salary on a different budget, on the development budget. So that was me, you know? So we see Iwo's name on a few of those. That's because I asked him to help us out, and he jumped on it. You know,
that's fantastic.
And of course, we didn't we didn't have to change a lick. You know, he could draw perfect until the day he died. He could draw perfectly. But I guess my takeaway from that is it was a great crew and we had a lot of fun, but we had more fun on 1 and 3 than 2 and 4, I would say, because we had a lot of interference on 2 and 4 in the writing. 1 and 3, I could have done shows like 1 and 3. I could have rid out my career doing 20 years of that. And we had a ball and done some amazing work, but it wasn't meant to be, you know. So, yeah, but I would say at the end, it's like I wrote the last Hanna-Barbera thing, you know, ever, and that's kind of something.
It is, yeah. So, what is your favorite version of Scooby-Doo? What would be your go-to if you wanted a Scooby-Doo hit? I'm
gonna out and out say our 3 movies is like my favorite version to watch. I think they're enough like the classic to be classic and nostalgic, but they have really high-end production values where the original show didn't. The original show was clunky, you know, endearing but clunky. I think we, honest to God, did the best version of that property ever. Although the writing on Be Cool is some of my favorite writing for that thing, you know, that's also legitimate. You know, Mr. Inc., I thought Mr. Inc. had great monsters, you know, and had a snappy style to it. And Derek White, I think, was the character guy in that. I love his stuff. He draws really great. I think they all have their virtues. My feet were held to the flame. I have an emotional attachment to our first 3 movies, you know, and I think they're really, really easy to be proud of those.
Why do you think Scooby-Doo is still with us after 47 years? I know there's a lot of people who are bitter about that. They're like, why can't my crappy show have half the life of this?
You know what? That's a question you hear a lot. Like people ask Gene Roddenberry that about Star Trek, and different people have different things that have been around. And I can't really point to any one thing. I think one of them is it's been around so long and so consistently produced. It's kind of in the zeitgeist, and those moms at Costco just know it when they see it and they buy it. It has familiarity. Everyone has grown up with it. Like every generation has grown up with it, so it's just sort of ubiquitous in the culture. It has an inherent appeal and charm in the designs as perpetrated by Iwo. I think some people like, now as a kid, I wasn't too keen on this, but people like the solvable mystery. That's a little bit different. You know, where it kind of pulls the audience in as a participant to figure it out with our main characters. Now, as a kid, I was 8 when the show came out. I was like, I want real monsters. I don't care about pulling the rubber mask off someone. But most people like that. And I think moms kind of like that. There's something sort of a little intellectually engaging, educational about, like, here's a mystery people can solve. You know, and that's the basis for all those things, for all those quasi-edutainment shows. So Scooby's kind of edutainment because it's putting clues together and coming up with a solution and solving a puzzle. So, you know, your Dora Explorer and Bob the Builder and all those things, you know, they tap into the same thing. So I'm just guessing. And I'm going to say for me, I don't find it any more particularly appealing than my favorite stuff. Like I'm a Johnny Quest guy,
yeah,
you know, which I far prefer, or Batman the Animated Series, which I far prefer, and that kind of thing. SWAT Kats even, you know, because it had that strong comic book element. But I find Scooby very pleasant, and I think it's in a way it's a little bit generic and innocuous, and it goes down easy, you know, like anyone can kind of enjoy it.
It's comfort food.
And some people really, really love it, but I don't think anyone hates it or dislikes it. You know, I'm a nut about Ren and Stimpy, but I get why people wouldn't like it, you know, because it's really extreme. You know, it appeals to me very much. Or I can see people like, boy, I like Batman the Animated Series, or I like Johnny Quest, but they're really boy-oriented, you know. And Scooby kind of has something for everybody on one level or another. So if I had to guess, I would say that.
Carl Sagan was a fan because of the whole skeptical aspect of it.
Yeah, I think there's a little of that, and I'm quite. My own politics are pretty atheistically skeptical and that kind of thing. So I guess that's like I have a real disdain for like psychics and things, but flim-flammery, you know, I'm not a fan. I like now that you put it that way, I said, yeah, I like seeing them get theirs and get exposed for pretending things, you know. So that's me. So maybe there's something.
All right.
Great. Well, have a good night. I probably gave you
too.
enough for 2 shows. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You betcha.
So there you have it. That was part 2 of my Lance Falk interview. Lance was right. He commented that he probably gave me enough for 2 episodes, and that's exactly what it turned out to be. So I'm grateful to him for the time that he gave to me. Had a really great conversation. Lance was really fun to talk to. He's just a very talented guy who knows a lot about animation and loves talking about it, just like the rest of us. So, like I said, I was really happy to have him on the show. I hope you were just as happy to have him on the show and enjoyed the 2 parts of the conversation. I'd love to hear what you have to say about either the interview with Lance or the Boomerang streaming service that I talked about at the top of the show, and anything else Scooby related that you want to talk about. You can always reach me at the Facebook page or on the Twitter account where I am at ScoobyDooCast. I forgot to mention it when I was talking about it earlier, but I did link to the news article in, I believe it was Variety, about the Boomerang streaming service. So if you're interested in that, you can also click through there. I'm always posting stuff on the page, links to cool things that I found, other fan pages, other bits and bobs. So it's generally worth checking out if you have any interest in the subject matter. I try to keep it different from kind of what everybody else is posting, so hopefully I'm managing that at least. There's also the Podcast Named Scooby-Doo Instagram account. Feel free to follow us there. And if you get the show off of iTunes, like many people probably do, while you're there, it only takes a minute. Feel free to rate and review the show. 5-star reviews really help with podcast standings and getting the show out there. And the reviews, of course, if you say some nice things about the show, it just encourages people to check us out. Also, if you love the show and you know some people who are interested in animation or Scooby-Doo or Hanna-Barbera and you think they might dig the show, feel free to share it. Spread the word, spread the gospel. And while I'm talking about spreading the word, I'm going to just say, if you dig Scooby-Doo, be sure to check out the other 2 podcasts that are out there, What's With You, Scooby-Doo, and Scooby-Doos or Scooby-Don'ts. Both really fun podcasts to listen to. Both kind of have their own angle. It's actually really great that the 3 of us are out here and we're all kind of taking a different attack at the subject matter. That just means that there's more good content to listen to with less repetition, so very little disharmony in the Scooby-Doo podcasting community. And I should probably cut it off there because I think the show's running a little long. We're kind of creeping up on that hour mark, and I know you've all probably got better, more interesting things to do. So, thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate your support. Be sure to come back next time when it'll be one of 2 interviews. I won't say any names just in case it doesn't actually pan out, but I'm sure you'll be happy with both of them. We're just trying to nail down some dates and get everything sorted out. Take care, keep on watching, and spread the Scooby word.
Keep it real.
We noticed when the ghost appeared, she flew around instilling fear. Exactly how she did was still unclear until we saw the broken flight rig of the balladeer, whose name is Kyle! The hovering balladeer! Kyle!
Everybody cheer! This is how we solve the mystery. This is how we solve the mystery.
So in summation, this narration is my donation to the art of mystery solving dictation. And here's what the bad guys say when they play where the law forbids.
Would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids.
This is how we solve the mystery. Bye.